So then we'll just look at each other because it'll be normal, like we're talking.
Oh. It's not normal with that.
And then if you want to emphasize a specific point, you can look into the camera. But when I'm talking to you, don't feel like you need to be like,
okay.
like that. So just be.
So Kim Jong-un, you better behave.
Exactly. You can do that, but don't. Yeah.
Okay, you're on.
Welcome to Asia in Review. I'm Ellise Akazawa, and today my guest will be Seongho Hong, a Kelly Fellow at Pacific Forum CSIS. Welcome, Seongho, and thanks for being here.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So our topic today will be understanding contemporary South Korea. And Seongho is a Korean national. He's been living and studying in the US for several years now, but his ties to Korea remain strong. And he's going to be sharing with us what it's been like just growing up in today's society in South Korea. We'll cover everything from education to economics to even pop culture. So it'll be a really interesting program, and I'm very glad that you're here with us today.
Thanks for invitation here.
Of course. So let's get started. Academics. What is it like growing up in what I imagine is a very academically competitive society?
Yeah. I mean, usually in Hawaii, there are a lot of Korean kids, and you see those Asian kids in math class who never misses A, and if they get one problem incorrect, they just cry. And imagine those kids in hundreds of those kids in one classroom, and that's how competitive it is in Korea. And education is really big in Korea, and there's a huge leverage of parents to their kids, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. So unlike US, where you spend time playing sports and like leisure activities, like surfing for yourself, there's nothing like that in Korea. So
really?
After school, after regular school, which ends about 5 or 6, after that they would go to academy or like a night
like a night
private
school?
Private tutoring. And so I mean, student life as a student in Korea, they're only studying just for the college.
Okay.
And that's how it is now.
So when does that kind of pressure start? Is that something that starts at a really young age, like in primary school, or does the pressure and the stress really come later on as you move into middle school or high school?
I think it's really great question. It used to be, when I was studying, it used to be starting at like a high school level, where they put a lots of effort in like school activities. But as competition gets higher, the parents want to start the competition early, which make them more advantageous going into better college.
Okay.
So it gets to middle school. Now it goes to elementary school. Now they're starting teaching kids how to speak English in kindergarten, which they can't
really
speak
early.
English in Korean either. So there's some cases, some kids that speak English in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure they can like speak that level of Korean.
Wow, that's really interesting. And it just seems, you know, I think a lot of people in the US can at least really relate to the pressure that you feel in high school with your SAT scores and studying for tests and trying to get into a good college. But I don't know that, at least in Hawaii, that the pressure really starts at that young of an age. What is it like growing up in that kind of society? Is it stressful? Do you know if people feel stressed out from a young age? Because that seems quite stressful.
That's a good question too. Actually, if you look at the OECD statistics, unluckily Korea is the #1 in suicidal level, and the most suicidal people criteria are 70s, 80s, who's detached from society because their work is over and they have no one to hang out. And the other group, not surprisingly, is the kids in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're stressed about going to really good college, and
Okay, so let's talk about the kinds of schools that there are in South Korea. Are all the schools public schools? Do most people want to get to a private school? What's that like?
I guess there's not big difference between public school and private school in Korea until they go into the high school. In high school, there is high school named a special purpose high school,
Okay.
which only 5% of that smart kids go into.
Okay.
And they have some advantage of going to really good schools either in US, in Korea. And I think it's really important to go into the school because it gives you really good environment for study because there's a peer pressure and environment for studying hard.
So it's very competitive, so you
Right.
want to succeed more.
Right.
Okay.
Plus, it gives you a really good network for the future for the kids. So
And that's important. Networking and who you meet does
since
seem to be really
since
important.
it's a really small country
Mhm.
with a bunch of people, so networking is really important.
Okay. So what kinds of extracurricular activities for students do exist? I mean, music, do students learn to play piano or violin, or is the focus just really very strictly on academics only? What about sports?
Okay.
Anything?
Right. So big difference here. I studied in US actually,
Okay.
and I was surprised that they, for application that you give into the admission in college,
For college.
right? You have to prove yourself your grade, and there's activities that you
Yes,
do.
that's a really important part
really
of
important
the
part.
admissions
It's-
process in the US.
I say it's not more than half. It's about half.
Mm-hmm.
Half academics, half activities. But in Korea, it's so different. 90% grade, 10% the activities, not like sports, but like I've blood donor and I've been president for school, and that's
Blood
only,
donor. Did you say blood donor?
Yeah, I've been the certification
Uh-huh.
of being blood donors and stuff like that. And the sport-wise, in US, there's some kids who are really good at sports and study at the same time, right?
Yes, that's a big part of it.
Right. In Korea, if you're gonna be an athlete, you don't have to study. So
Oh, that must be nice.
if you're gonna be an athlete, you don't have to study, but you only do the basic things like just graduating high school with the lowest grade. You're still fine. But in US, there's so many talented kids who are good at both.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, an important part of what colleges are looking for here, that well-roundedness, being good at different things, and sort of having that balance, because you don't want to, or at least in the US, I think that for some people the assumption is you don't want someone just focused on academics
Right.
only. You want them to have a balanced life, be able to, succeed in academics, but also have other interests that will serve you hopefully
Right.
well in life.
And yes, and speaking of activities, that the sports-wise, I mean, Korean people are really into sports. That's like soccer. That's like national sport. But that's what you can do after you go into college or whatever.
I see.
For until high school, you only study in dream of playing soccer in weekends during the college life.
So what's a school day like in South Korea? In Hawaii, I don't know the exact times right now, but when I was growing up, I think the school day was from 7:45 in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And many of the friends that I subsequently met later on in college were really surprised at how short the school day was. How long is the school day in South Korea?
To be honest with you, it's been quite a long. So I say from my long memory.
Okay.
I usually went to school it starts at 9 o'clock. It ends around 5. But I would
a long
go
day.
I would go back to my home, back home, or I go to the private tutoring or like after school academies, and usually spend time there about 5 hours.
So that seems like a lot of time. Tell me a little bit about these academies. Are they expensive? It seems like that must be an additional cost on top of school.
Right. That's the problem here. I mean,
Okay.
all the government presidents are trying their effort to cut down all the educational fees, but it doesn't work because it's a competition. Like you can't tell, the academy is illegal because the public school is enough. But parents are not like that. I have to teach my kid more because it's more competitive. And of course, as competition is higher, the academy is getting more expensive. And they try to attract students more with the better, let's say, we have Harvard's background teachers, things like that. So the competition is higher, the price, of course, getting higher too.
Wow, that seems just so competitive. And you keep going back to the role of parents. So it seems like parents have a really big role to play in this, and South Korean young people are receptive to hearing that from their parents?
I mean, it was worse. I mean, yes. I guess it was worse when it was in my parents' generation. But as American culture comes in, they have a little right to say against their parents. But still, I don't know. I went to school in US, and there are some kids. I went to Hopkins, and it's really good medical school, I guess. And I asked my friends, like, so you were in Hopkins just to be a doctor. So why do you want to be a doctor? And they have no answer. I heard that they usually say, oh, I heard being a doctor pays you good and it gives you fame. So who tells you that? I mean, she or he would say, oh, it's from my parents. So it's sometimes a problem, but sometimes it's a good because at least they listen to their parents. They never be wrong.
And you're talking about other Korean students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's good luck for me that I don't have that kind of parents. But still, if I do, I'll be listening to them too.
Okay. So you had mentioned that you went to school in the United States. At what point did you, I guess, come to the U.S. for your education?
Okay. To be frank, I came to U.S. right after middle school because I grew up, kind of wealthy neighborhood.
Okay.
And trend back then was studying in U.S. guarantees your future.
Okay.
Then I said, oh, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna stay here because it's my country. But most of my friends left, and I had nobody. Like literally, my friends group, they all left to U.S. to study, and I was alone, so I couldn't help staying there. It's kind of sad story, but yeah, that's how it was.
Okay, and how old were you when you came to the U.S.?
I came here alone at 17 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I was in New Hampshire, but everyone was really nice.
Was that a big transition because you're from Seoul?
Yeah.
Was that a big transition from Seoul to New Hampshire? I imagine there might have been some cultural differences,
some
adjustments.
Yeah, right. Actually, the U.S. or perception of America that I have is made majorly based on the American movies, like Batman's or like Home Alone. It's all based in New York or Gotham. So I imagine, all American cities are it's crazy, all big buildings.
And
but
then New
Hampshire, it's middle of nowhere. I had to walk 30 minutes to get a bottle of drink, but people are nice there. So I think it was better to start off my American life in countryside.
Okay, and then what made you apply to Johns Hopkins? Is that a school that enjoys good name recognition in South Korea?
Yes, and that's exactly why. But here's a good story too. So I told you about this 5%, the special purpose high school that that admits only 5% of top school, and there were kids in Johns Hopkins of my friends. He came straightly from Korea, and I asked him, "Why did you choose Johns Hopkins?" And he said it's the highest rank of the schools that he got into.
Okay.
So what decides the high school, higher level of school? And he said, the U.S. college rankings, that's our
the standard.
Standards, which school is better or not. It's not this school has a better program.
Okay.
I mean, it's not 100% of all Koreans.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, it gives you a good sense of what it is like in Korea. The rank and name is really important.
Okay. So did you go to Johns Hopkins because of a specific program, or did you go for the name recognition? And you can be honest.
Yeah, it's shameful, but I chose, I guess, Johns Hopkins for its reason.
Okay.
I mean, for its name.
For the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it pays me back well.
And did you enjoy your time studying at Johns Hopkins? Were there many other, you mentioned other Korean students there. Were there many?
Yeah,
Koreans?
Of course. I mean, if you go around, you see all Korean everywhere. Even the school that I went in New Hampshire, middle of nowhere, there were 10% of kids were from Korea.
That's
it's
really
normal.
fascinating
Yeah.
because you wouldn't think that you'd go to these small towns and find big pockets of South Koreans living there.
Right, but it's happening in East Coast. So there are like 260,000 kids who study abroad in Korea.
Or study abroad from South Korea.
Yeah.
Okay.
And about a quarter of them are in United States, and I guess it's a huge number for Korean population.
So in deciding these schools, obviously, you just mentioned name recognition is really important, but what also about sort of the programs or the types of careers that students are choosing? Do their parents have a big say in what kind of careers? Do South Korean youth today feel like they have the opportunity to become whatever they want, whether it's doctors and lawyers or artists or whatever it may be, social scientists?
Before this show, I had to prepare for this, so I look up the internet. What's mostly the Korean youth want to be and want to select for their future career. And number 1 was teacher.
Interesting.
Yeah. Number 2, K-pop stars.
Pop stars.
Pop stars. Number 3 was government officials or government employee.
That's a really interesting mix.
Interesting. But
teacher, K-pop star, government employee.
It explains Korean society so well.
Explain it then.
Okay. The teachers and government employees for it's really a random choice for teenagers. And explains Korean culture well because it's kind of sad. Like you ask American kids, what do you want to be? They would be so various,
Yeah.
Oh, I want to be a wrestler. I want to whatever, snowboarder, surfer. There are
many different career choices.
Right, but in Korea they choose teachers and government employees because it's stable.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not high paying, but it's stable and it guarantees the paycheck until your retirement.
That sounds pretty good to me.
I know, but
Stability
it's a
paycheck.
teenager. It's teenager. It's not like 30s or 20s.
That's true.
So
you would think that there might be, as teenagers, maybe more optimism or idealism or people who have bigger dreams.
So I would say they are choosing these careers because they're not adventurous enough.
Okay.
Yeah, some flies. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And I have to tell you one more thing, that out of those smart kids in a class, smart kids in class, if you're number 1, you going to medical school is kind of decided. It's decided.
Really?
Yeah. It's just like that. I mean, if you're smart, you have to be a doctor. It's because it guarantees high paying and the fame.
Being a doctor, I think, in many areas, I mean, even still in the U.S., that is perceived as a very prestigious job.
But you don't see really smart kids. Oh, I have to be a doctor thing, right? They can do whatever because they're smart. But in Korea, if you're smart, you become a doctor because there's a quota for becoming a doctor. So if you're number 1, why not be one?
So anybody in South Korea who wants to become a doctor, they just can't go and do it. They have to be in the top % of their particular
top 10%
school.
or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that definitely must enhance the competitiveness.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how did you decide on your career field? How did you decide to pursue international affairs?
I'm an economics major.
Okay.
And right after graduation, I went to EU in Korea, EU delegation in Korea.
Okay, so the European Union.
Yeah,
Okay.
European Union in Korea. And I was in trade section, and that time the FTA negotiation was going on. And luckily, I was in big part of it. And I found out that the politics and economics are always going together, even though they're saying, oh, we have to keep this principle of separation of economics and politics, but it never gets that way. So that's the point that I said, oh, so learning politics or international relations is really important, achieving my goal as an economist. So I changed it, I tilted my route, just like that. Yeah, yeah. It sounds really fancy, but.
Were your parents supportive of that choice for you?
Thanks to my parents. I mean, they respect my decisions, and no matter what I do, I mean, for that I have to behave, but still, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really great. Those supportive parents are really, really key, and
Yeah.
you're lucky to have them.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And, yeah, I remain always thankful too. So.
All right, so
Well,
let's transition away from academics, and I do have to ask you about North Korea. Being someone from South Korea, I'm sure you hear and get asked, especially in the United States, a lot about North Korea. What is it like to grow up having them as your neighbor?
This is a right question to ask me since I was working on, as my research project, like the this crisis insensitivity going on in Korea.
Crisis insensitivity. Okay.
Yes. Like let's say, in other words, it's called threat fatigue.
Threat fatigue. Got
Yeah.
it.
So in 1994, that was the first time that North Korea was verbally attacking Korea, saying, "Oh, we're gonna make Seoul a sea of fire." And I remember I was like, how old am I? Like 8 years old. Yeah, I was 8 years old back then. I saw all South Koreans just running down to the stores, clearing all the shelves of instant ramens because they were really worried about impending war. And I remember right after first nuclear test, the stock market in Korea called Kospi just crashed. But now the third nuclear test, they were like just hanging out. And those pervert attacks, my mom was on vacation, and they were like Facebooking and do whatever they want. Like, do they even care about this? But it's bad sense. It's bad in sense that they're losing this thread as like on insensitivity. It's really dangerous, but they're not really reacting to it. But in other hands, I think it's really good since I think it means that South Korea-U.S. alliance is working really well.
Okay.
Yeah, this deterrence framework is really working well. That's why South Koreans and the stock market itself represents not only Koreans but international investment too. So I think this insensitivity should not be called insensitivity. It's more like fatigue or
Okay.
or
So you think
better
that
alliance.
the U.S.-South Korea alliance really helps to provide a feeling of stability and security.
Of course.
So South Koreans need to worry a
Right.
little bit less about what
Right,
North Korea
right.
is up
And
to.
I mean, I think North Korea's threat is intending to make South Koreans more anxious and nervous, but they're not. I mean, we are not reacting as they wanted.
So in your opinion, do you think that North Korea might start to continue to escalate its rhetoric in order to get that reaction that it wants from South Korea, seeing as South Koreans have had a sort of very calm reaction to what's going on?
Right. I mean, that's exactly what they have been doing. They're like using all different cards from their pockets to, I think, to attract our attentions. It's working a little bit, but thanks to U.S. and its force in Korea and Madam Park's strong rhetoric back to North Korea, I mean, it's working fine in Korea. But there's a little bit of nervous because there's continuous verbal attacks.
What was it like as a child growing up, knowing that North Korea was your neighbor? Is that something you were afraid of or concerned about as a child? Or are children in South Korea oblivious to the threat from the North?
During the Democratic Party, like left wings, during from early 2000, we thought North Korea as our friends and families, and that's the time. Oh, we have to do this peaceful reunification. We were taught that way in school. But after 2010, all those shelling islands and killing civilians and
So North Korea killing South Korea's
right,
civilians.
right. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just sort of providing some more context.
Right. Killing 46 sailors in Cheonan vessel in Korea. That's, I think, was a big turnover for South Koreans to think that, oh, it's not way we think. It's not family or friends thing. It's more like an enemy. We have to be cautious about it. Yeah, that's a big turnover there. And now I think myself, I was like, oh, North Korea, we should talk and we should communicate. But we have been doing for 60 years already. and U.S. probably has done the same thing. They've been trying everything, talk it out and negotiating, but it's not working.
So as a young person, what do you think that the prospects for the future with North Korea might be? Do you think there is a chance at a peaceful reunification?
Well, not under this regime, because the direction is so different.
So when you say this regime, do you mean the Kim Jong-un regime, or
Oh,
do you mean the...
I say, yeah, Kim Jong-un regime, plus my regime, I mean, in South Korean regime.
Okay.
Since they're both taking hard lines.
Mm-hmm.
I think many of Koreans, whether it's wrong or right, they're waiting for North Korea to collapse. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not the intelligence in North Korea, so that's, I think, what South Korean is expecting. But you know what? Yeah, we never know what's going to happen in their hermit country. So
one of the arguments that I had heard from a South Korean that I was speaking with last year was that, as a personal opinion, he wasn't interested in reunification with North Korea, specifically because he would be worried that it would harm the South Korean economy. He said, you know, South Korea's got a very strong, vibrant economy, really huge global multinational brands, you know, companies like Samsung that everybody recognizes, and then to sort of bring North Korea into the mix now, that would really damage the South Korean economy. Is that how you see it as well?
My opinion, I understand him, but my opinion is a little bit different. I think the North Korea is acting as a stymie for better development of South Korean economy. So it's good, of course it's good, and we have to pay a lot for reunification. Let's say they're like starving kids, and there's no infrastructure whatsoever, and that's what we have to pay in exchange of peace. But I think he's forgetting, I mean, he's overlooking the fact that there's a natural resource in North Korea which we can use. And the reunified Korea will have 80 million people. Now we have only 50 in South, 50 million, yeah. 80 million people, it's a big jump. And yeah, I think no matter how, reunification should be a goal for South Korea, since even if we have to pay a lot for reunification, we still have to do it because it will give us a so big chance of leaping again. And it will bring the economic boom around the region because it's going to boost up the trade and exchange.
That's a really good positive outlook.
Yeah.
Another question that I had wanted to ask you was about military service in South Korea. Is that mandatory for everyone to participate in the military?
Yes, luckily, unluckily, yes, it's mandatory. I myself had to serve for 2 years in Korea, as I actually was in army for 2 years from 2008 and 2010. Until 2010, and that was a time that all those harsh stuff happened in Korea, and it was a disaster in Korea. I think in some matter, I think it can be interpreted as a waste of youth time. I mean, spending your 20s, 2 years in barracks with all those kids, it's waste. But in other words, in other hand, I think it was really good time for me to kind of understand what it should be. I mean, what we have to act against North Korea, how we have to think about North Korea. It's not really friends, or sometimes it can be an enemy. To be honest with you, if I didn't go to the army, I wouldn't worry about anything going on in Korea. I mean, at least
you wouldn't worry.
Yeah, I wouldn't. At least me serving in army for 2 years give me a good sense of what it is to be. I mean, it has to be like South Korea. Living in only country that is divided into two. Yeah, especially due to the war. Yeah.
So, in terms of your own life, when did you go back to South Korea to join the army? Was that in between high school and college? Did you take a break from college? When in your life did you have to serve?
Most of the Koreans including myself, they go to join army after first year of college.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And imagine that, like you're having, that's the party time, and that's the time that all those kids, I mean, it's not me, but in Korea, they study for 15 and 16 years to get into college, and they play for 1 year, then they go back to army. That's a hard time for them. We should give really good credit for them, but Korean society
Absolutely.
really do not recognize those 2 years as a big service.
So you did your 1 year first at Johns Hopkins, and then you
Right.
returned to South Korea.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, especially coming from an American
Right.
school, going back to South Korea to do military service, was that a difficult transition back?
Right, because I've been living in America for 6-7 years back then.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to Korea for serving was really big challenge for myself, and the culture was really different because in America, the liberty, I mean, the New Hampshire license plate, live free or die. And in army, it's like, you don't follow my order, you die. It's totally different. So I had a little hard time at the beginning, but as time goes by, I get used to it. It's really hierarchy, right, in army. But I thought it was really good experience back then. Before I go into the army, I thought it was waste of time, but after that, 2 years in whole life, which 80 years, 2 years out of 80 years, not bad.
So is this mandatory requirement to being in the military, does that apply to everybody, both men and women equally, or is it just
Only men.
only men?
And there's inequality in Korea.
Okay.
I think it's basically the sexism, but I think for women to fully achieve the equality in Korea, they have to do something about this difference in mandatory service and military service. Because whenever they fight over this rights, they always fight over, women always say, we have to have more power, but men always say, you don't even go to army. What do you want? You don't even do anything for country, but now you are expecting us to give you some more room.
So what are the current arguments, if you know, against allowing or against requiring that women participate fully in the military as well? And if you don't know, that's fine. I
There's
don't want to put you on
nothing
the
going
spot.
on about that, but men in Korea, men are requesting for like the extra credit for applying for job if you served military.
So
and
you'll get
the
some
Women's
kind of
Ministry of Women and Family are opposing that because they are saying it's inequality for
Okay.
men to have the extra credit in application,
Okay.
applying for job.
That equality argument is really interesting, especially since South Korea does have its first female head of state.
Right.
Was that a surprise to you at all? I mean, that's still a milestone that we have yet to reach in the United States.
Right. But the thing is, I'm not sure. I have to say this already. But okay, according to the recent Economist survey index, out of 26 countries of OECD, Korea was ranked lowest for the job equality for women and men mainly because women do not have really senior job in Korea. And it's really surprising for Koreans to have first woman leader, at least all that region. Japan never done it, and China never done it. But the thing is, our Madam Park, my president, is not really perceived as a politician that correctly represent women.
Why is that?
She has shown little effort to represent women during her career, and she's been considered as a woman leader stronger than a man.
I see.
Yeah, and she doesn't have her kids, and she doesn't have a husband,
So she might not be representative of many South Koreans' women's actual experiences. Okay.
Right. And ironically, she had during the presidential election, she has to defend herself as a woman, because the opposition party was attacking her, saying that you're biologically woman, not societal woman.
That seems really harsh.
That was harsh, but ironically, that's what happened during Korean election. So it's really far-fetched to see Madam Park as a first female president. I mean, she is, but yeah, it's not like a big jump in Korea.
Okay. I wanted to just jump back quickly to the military service aspect and ask you, if you don't mind sharing, what did you do in the military?
I was stationed in the Army Academy as an instructor for cadets. I was training with them in like a rough field and reading maps together, you know, and that's what I did. But most of them, they're stationed at the GOP and really frontier to be a guard, and yeah, that's a harsh job, but yeah, most of them go to the frontier.
You said it gave you a better understanding and appreciation of the issues that South Korea faces, but did it change you? Did that military service change you or change your outlook or your future plans in any way?
Not really. I have to say, yeah, not really, but during the service time, I met a lot of friends actually who has same goal with me. Let's say they're like working all over the world. That's about it. I mean, good thing is you met really good friends there.
Okay.
That you don't meet because I was in United States. I didn't have didn't have any Korean friends, but in military I met.
And then what was it like after you concluded military service and went back to Johns Hopkins? Was that also a difficult transition as well?
Yes. For 2 years, my brain has been like doing all like map reading things and not so much about economics. So first time I came back to Hopkins, I was taking all the easy classes, but I was still having a hard time. But after 6 months, it comes back, you know.
Okay.
That's
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the next portion of our program, I want to talk about South Korean pop culture.
Yeah, why not?
It is everywhere. In Hawaii, K-dramas are really popular, K-pop music is really popular. But for many people, sort of this South Korean pop culture is sort of new, but I'm guessing it's been around for a much longer time in South Korea.
Right.
So let's start with the obvious example that took the world by storm last year, Gangnam Style.
Yeah, right. I mean, coincidentally, I'm from Gangnam too.
Oh, okay.
To give you a little tip of what Gangnam is. It's a southern part of Seoul, which is supposed to be a richer place.
So more affluent type of area.
Right.
Okay.
So Psy calls it like Beverly Hills of South Korea.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Is that what it's like?
I think it's most Americanized part of Seoul. Like you see, the interesting thing is if you go walk on Seoul Street, like Gangnam Street, some random street in Gangnam, there are more Starbucks and coffee beans and McDonald's and all Krispy Kremes. It's just Americanized. Like the things that you find in New York, you will find in Gangnam too. And speaking of K-pop, it's true that it was a big hit in U.S. and including U.S. and all around the world. It's still going on in Thailand and just be.
It's still going on in the U.S.
Yeah, just be true here. He's coming out with a new album. So, and in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow, okay.
The name title of the song is Gentleman, but I don't know he being a gentleman, but yeah, he's coming in 2 weeks. I wish you guys all like it. I mean, his promoter. I'm not really his promoter, but yeah. And there's a boy band called Super Junior.
I've heard of it.
These kids won the chart in Taiwan for 54 continuous weeks.
Wow.
It's with one song. I mean, it's big. I think they have really big soft power all around the world. And you know what? I'm heading to Bologna right after this job in Hawaii. And I'm excited because the K-pop is heating up the Europe too. So it'll be a really good source for me to start conversation with anyone. I mean, it has been helping me here too. So everyone's asking, oh, do you know him? Do I know you? Something like that. It's really good for Koreans to have those.
I think it really is too. It definitely shows, the rest of the world what South Korea is like as a society. So we do get a lot of South Korean pop culture here. Do you get a good mix of South Korean pop culture in South Korea as well as media from around the world, or are you only focused on South Korean pop culture?
In South Korea.
Yeah, in South Korea. What's it like?
oh, we love Rihanna and we know everyone from here. But the thing is, this Japan culture and China's pop culture is not in Korea. I mean, it's not popular in Korea. I don't know how it went out to China and it's blooming all big land there, but I think we have better culture for now. Like not better culture, but more popular. The way of invading those markets is better for now. Yeah. And thanks to YouTube.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem is here. K-pop has been doing so well last 2-3 years, but Korean people and Korean government is worrying about the source and this resource for Korean pop culture is limited. I mean, if you listen to Korean music, I mean, they're like producing very similar songs.
So lack of originality.
Right. So we need some breakthrough somehow. But yeah, let's wait till this gentleman song comes.
And see what happens in the next couple of weeks. What about ideals and standards of beauty? So it's very well known that South Korea is a country that really enjoys plastic surgery.
Yeah, you may say that.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Standards of beauty in South Korea.
So if you start walking through that street in Gangnam, you will see you will see the plastic surgeon office, just like you see McDonald's in US.
Really?
Yeah, it's that many. And thanks to the advanced plastic surgery in Korea, all the Chinese people are coming to Korea to have a meditour. It's called meditour. They come
so
to
like
Korea,
a medical tour.
Yeah, do shopping and plastic surgery. It's a beauty tour.
Oh, all in one.
Yeah, all in one. And you know, it's kind of shame that Korea was picked as a #1 plastic surgery, like most plastic surgery nation in Korea, in the world. And we see the problem is everyone getting more beautiful is good, but they're losing their individual characteristic at the same time. Let's say, all they want, actually, the most surgery they have is double eyelids, just like
that's a common procedure in Hawaii as well.
Right, and the pointier nose, which also this perspective of these white people. And there's a really funny saying in Korea. There are mostly 2 kinds of twins in the world, right? Fraternal twins and identical twins.
Yes.
In Korea, there are 3 kinds. It's called fraternal twins, and identical twins, and medical twins.
Medical twins.
Yes, because they look all the same.
And that's from all of the plastic surgery.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big problem later on.
Is there a social stigma against getting plastic surgery? If so many people do it, I imagine that people must generally be okay with it, or is there any kind of stigma associated with surgery?
Since it's so common, there's no way to figure out. But there's a little funny saying like, "Oh, you will figure out if your baby is different from your mother," and something like that.
And is the plastic surgery craze, is that unique to Seoul and the bigger cities, or does that spread elsewhere throughout the country? I'm assuming it'd be more pronounced in the bigger cities.
Yeah, they would come to Seoul to get those kind of surgery because it's a city of beauty. I mean, it's a cosmopolitan place. So at least if you come to Korea, I'll give you some discount.
Thank you, Seongho. So tell me, do these standards of beauty apply equally to men and women? Is it just women who are subjected to these sort of idealized notions of beauty?
Yeah.
Or is it men as well? Because some of the sort of more recent media articles that I'm seeing show that South Korean men are just as interested in plastic surgery and cosmetics.
Yeah. Originally, it started from women, but now I think they're like not more men, but there are quite big number of men who do plastic surgery. I mean, myself, I care about these cosmetics and keeping really good skin, like really important.
South Koreans are famous for skin.
Yeah, and they invest a lumps of money for their fashion. I think, this is good conclusion. South Koreans really care about what other people view them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a right way to put it. Yeah. They really care. But I don't think it's bad. It's good in the sense that they they're really being fashionable in Korea. If you go to Seoul, they're really like high level.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's bad when they only care about their appearance, not the contents, like not inside. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where do you think that these ideals of beauty are coming from? Is it just the influx of plastic surgery and the fact that South Korean media is so pervasive? You know, you see all these pop stars and movie stars and people in magazines. Does that add to the pressure for, you know, the average everyday young South Korean to feel like they need to look a certain way?
I don't think I can answer this question.
Okay.
But the thing is, the media really plays a big time for this plastic surgery and things like this.
Okay.
We call South Korean culture as appearance concentrated society. So
Okay.
yeah.
Very interesting.
I think it's good. It's better than they spending. I mean, they spending money on like cigarettes but they still do. But yeah.
All right, so I have some questions about where you see the future of South Korea. So we'll start off with the economy. Did the South Korean economy experience the same kinds of problems that the rest of the world did during the last major recession? Was South Korea hit hard by that?
Yes, of course, because South Korea, since it's a really small country, if you turn around the globe, I mean, it's tiny bit. They're really dependent on their export for their growth. But if there's a recession internationally, Korea is hurt really bad, since it's like I said, it's economy. I mean, dependent on export. And what was the question?
No, one of the things I wanted to specifically ask was about young people and unemployment.
Oh, okay.
So the recession has created a lot of problems for youth throughout the world, including in the United States, where young people, fresh college graduates, have trouble getting jobs. Does that same problem exist in South Korea? Is there a really?
Of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there's unemployment rate like just soars, and
for young people or
for young people right after graduate their undergraduate, then it becomes a problem of degree or education inflation in Korea. Since I told you there's so much competition, they're trying to find the answer for their unemployment as their low education. Even though they have enough already, they would go to master school just for reason to spend time and be more competitive. But it doesn't work out because everyone is going into master's degree.
So the more people who get these degrees, the less that they're actually worth in the workforce.
Right. And in workforce, if you're just fresh off the college, since you're not employing him because there's so many masters or PhDs already, due to this education inflation. Why would you pay for more? I mean, the same wage to undergraduate, not PhD. So it becomes really a big problem in Korea, since the age that they start as a worker is delayed as 30s and 32s, because that's the time they end their PhDs.
That seems like a huge problem, especially since we've talked about all the competitiveness in the academic world in South Korea. When you have people who are working so hard and spend so much of their lives, you would think that they would expect a reward at the end of that, and the reward would be, you know, a good, steady, well-paying job. But if you have all these people coming through the system who are working really hard and don't get that reward at the end, that seems like it might be sort of a recipe for some social problems.
That connects to the high societal level that I was talking about. It's all connected, society. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So in addition to sort of this youth unemployment, what are the big challenges facing South Korea coming up in the future? One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that South Korea has a declining birth rate. So very often we hear about Japan's declining birth rate. It's the subject of so many different articles in the media. We always hear about Japan's falling birth rate. But South Korea is having the same problem, isn't it?
Yeah. It's connected to that high the education competition and their delayed age of starting their career and the education cost that they have to pay. It's all connected to that low birth rate.
Got it.
So if myself, I think, oh, I should have only one kid or two. Two will be hard because I have to pay all those things. I have to support the kids until they get 30.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Until then, they have to get this plastic surgery. It's all connected.
So many costs.
So many plastic surgery, the high school and the private academy and personal tutoring, and the college tuition and PhDs. I mean, it's a vicious cycle that keeps this birth rate low. But I guess there's some government policy that brings this birth rate up, like having third kid will pay for your daycares and everything. So I wish it works, but you know, it's a big problem since the declining population in South Korea, even it's a big problem in Korea, just like Japan.
Just like Japan. So what do you think are the big opportunities for South Korea coming up in the next few years? Obviously, you know, the economy, it was, like you said, hurt in the recession, but South Korean companies do very, very well. What do you think are going to be the next big growth sectors? Do you think South Korea can continue to maintain its influence, or is it just going to keep growing and doing really well?
I think I'm really negative about the future economics in Korea unless they find new initiative or a new engine to burn it up. I mean, they've been growing. I mean, it's a little country. The capacity is bigger. I mean, in that little country, they are fighting with apples, and they're winning. And those.
So when you say fighting with Apple, you mean like Samsung and
yeah,
Apple?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, Samsung is it's Korea. It's like representing Korea. They're the same thing, like Samsung in Korea. I mean, they ruled Korea, so. I think if they fail to find new motives or new engines that bring this economics better, I don't think it's gonna keep growing unless they have achieved this unification with resources. But yeah.
So do you have any suggestions, do you think, for maybe where South Korea might start to develop new industries or find industries that already exist but seek to grow them internationally?
Yes, yes, I do. Like I said, so Samsung and Hyundai, all those big companies, there are 10 big companies in Korea that accounts of 80% of total GDP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's just that those 10 companies,
it's
80% of GDP.
Interesting, right? They're called 재벌, and those 재벌s are in charge. They should be the responsible ones who employ people, right? But only 6% of employment are in charge of by these 재벌s, which is unbalanced, right?
Yeah.
So I think there should be some reformation, economic reformation, that leads these 재벌 or these big companies to lead South. They're just taking care. I mean, they're caring only about their profits, but they have to understand that the South Korea's welfare and its strength in economy will bring them more profits. So they have to responsible for employing more people from society, not just carrying the current profit.
I see. All right, so we have just a few more minutes left in the program. Did you have any final thoughts about South Korea? Any other stories you wanted to share? Anything about where South Korea is going to be headed in the future?
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is as I said, it's a little country, but what they're doing right now is they're sweeping out the Billboard chart with Psy, and the head of UN is Korean, and head of World Bank is Korean again.
So South Koreans are in a lot of really major
they're
influential
doing
positions.
well in world community, and as a part of that country, I'm really proud of it, and I think their human resource is really good. So why don't they keep it up and bring a better society for the world? I mean, I'd be proud too. So,
Sure, and I think South Korea is doing great, and it's definitely a model for other countries.
Yeah, I mean that's good. It's shameful to live only divided country in the world, but if it's solved, I think it'll be a really good country overall around the world. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Seongho, for being here today.
Yeah.
Seongho Hong, excuse me, is a Kelly Fellow at Pacific Forum CSIS, and we're very lucky to have him. He will be working on future publications for Pacific Forum, which you'll be able to find on the website, www.pacforum.org. And Seongho, very best of luck in graduate school, and thank you again for sharing your insights
Thank you for inviting again.
what it's like to live in contemporary South Korea. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
That was fun.
Good job.
Every time. I think we're just a little bit short, but I thought that was a good time
Yeah.
to sort of. Thank you, Seongho.
Did it work?
It
Better-
should have.
better.
I think it should have still, as long as it didn't fully come apart. Oh yeah, that should be fine.